I'm really delighted to welcome Simon White, who is General Counsel for Latin America, Europe, the Middle East, and Africa of Cognizant. So, Simon, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Just to kick it off, can you just tell us a little bit about how you became the General Counsel for Cognizant and, in charge of such a broad geographical area as well, and a big team?
Great. Well, really, real pleasure to be here. Thank you, everyone. Good morning. Thanks, May. So probably many of you won't know Cognizant is a large IT services company listed on the NASDAQ with about 300,000 employees globally. And I am one of the deputy general counsels globally and have responsibility, as May said, for a regional area. I have a team of about 100 lawyers and underneath me doing a variety of in-house work. And I really grew very organically, as many do in the tech sector. I've been at Cognizant over a decade. And when I joined, I was the first lawyer outside the US. I was a lawyer number 6 globally within the organization. We now have about 350 lawyers globally. And the growth of those lawyers and the legal team very much reflects the growth of the company. So I've really grown up. I wasn't laterally hired into this role. I started off just negotiating kind of customer contracts anywhere in the world other than North America, and are now doing something quite different, but quite fun. And I think, many tech companies grow fast and go on a journey. While Cognizant has a certain scale, the growth and the pressure of growing companies and things in the tech sector, I think, is the same regardless of the size of the company. And hopefully some of the stuff I'll talk about on diversity and inclusion today is relevant really wherever you are. I mean, we all have challenges on that, but the reasons and the imperative to do that and why I'm very grateful that Withy King, having this seminar today, the reasons for doing that and talking about that, they never change. They're still there and the fight has to go on.
Agreed. Can you just talk a little bit about the key components of your role as General Counsel? Are there any aspects that you people would find surprising about what you do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so I think, look, I suppose I do all the normal stuff people would expect. Sorry to use a terrible word. I do all the stuff that people may expect of a General Counsel, covering all sorts of areas of law, and some of which I know, some of which I don't. I think probably when I started out as a younger lawyer, I probably never anticipated what percentage of my time when I got to a more senior position would be spent on human matters, people matters. And I don't just mean basic HR law stuff and management, but a huge aspect of how much of what I do is about motivating and driving my team, and how much of it's actually thinking about driving change in an organization, essentially. And driving that change is very much underpinned by thinking, how do humans act? How do you get crowds to do things? How do you get inside people's heads to drive that change, whatever that is? And whilst I find that fascinating now, I think, when I was at law school, I never imagined as a lawyer I would be dealing with issues like that. And I suppose going along with the human side, a lot of my time is about influencing change. And a lot of that's how do you navigate an organization? How do you navigate people? I think some of that's politics, which isn't necessarily a word I like, but it all comes down to people. So in many ways, I wish I had a degree in sociology, perhaps more than I wish I have had a degree in or in anthropology even, rather than law, because so much of it is that human aspect. But I think the joy is dealing with people, seeing people grow and flourish is actually one of the biggest joys, though, of the role I do.
So one of the things that you are obviously trying to foster change in is the area of ED&I. And can we just start with a sort of background question about that? Do you think that diversity brings strength to an organization? And if so, why? Why does diversity help an organization in operationally or in whatever way?
Yeah, so I absolutely believe it brings strength to an organization. And I think an organization that does not embrace inclusion and diversity and equality is critically flawed. That may not have been what people thought in the past, but I think for a number of reasons. The first is that oft-used phrase now, being your authentic self. If when you come to the office, whether that's physical or metaphysical or virtual or whatever it is we do now, if you cannot be your authentic self because you are literally wrapping yourself in a uniform of a certain social construct, because maybe you're a female partner in a law firm and you feel you need to dress like a man to get across, or maybe you're a gay man who feels he can't talk about what he does at home at the weekend because he doesn't have children, he doesn't fit into that, and therefore if you can't be your authentic self, you are wasting energy that you could be putting into doing the role. I'm an unashamed capitalist here. I will come on to the human aspect of this, but we're generally here in business to kind of be profitable in a way. Obviously within a non-for-profit there's still a sense of social profit that you get out, some sense of success. If people are wasting their energy on hiding who they are, they're not going to be giving 100% to the role they're doing, and I genuinely believe that. There's also a human aspect, very much a human aspect here, is it's the right thing to do. Now, I can talk to you about the economic argument about why diversity and inclusion is good for your bottom line, your P&L. I can talk about that forever, and that is very important. We can talk about why data is important. But this is fundamentally the right thing to do. And I think when we forget that, we lose a sense of who we are. There's a lot of evidence. You can go to, I don't know, Harvard Business School and read about how, diverse teams, drive business in better ways because you're bringing different thoughts to the table and you're challenging people. We know all of that. We can see all that data, but for some reason that isn't moving the needle enough. But the one thing that should move the needle is because it is the right thing to do.
That's really interesting. I mean, I can remember working in law firms at a time, a while ago, when I had friends who were gay and weren't out of the closet at work. And it was really difficult, for them to have to, and they did put on a facade. It was like a different sort of persona that you would go into work with. And I feel, from what I can see now, that things have actually come quite a long way. But obviously there's more work to do. I mean, do you have a view about that?
So I think, May, when we were talking before doing this, obviously we kind of rehearsed a few questions. And I think one of the things I was thinking, a word I wrote down on my notes was complacency. And I'm not going to underline that in the last 100 years, in terms of diversity, inclusion, equality, the world has moved a lot. But we mustn't think that, especially in somewhere like England, the UK, that, oh gosh, we've solved all these issues. We have all this law in place. And of course, this is you're a law firm, I'm a lawyer, we're talking about legal things here. The statute has given all these protections to people. But the law only goes so far. It's about a social construct. It's about a social contract between people. And just because we have laws doesn't mean that we have equality. And of course, can continue to go further and further. And it's very easy to look around and go, well, look, if we were in, I don't know, Kenya or Nigeria, people are far worse off than we are. And, we've got all these protections. That's simply not true. The rights we have, the human rights we have, either in law or in society, are fragile. They can change in a heartbeat. I'm not going to make you look in the United States, some divisive stuff that happened under the Trump regime. I'm not telling you who I would or wouldn't vote for in the US, but we thought we got to a certain place and the needle swung backwards once again there. That we haven't won the battle. And I think one of the challenges I find is in an organization where a lot of the workforce I work with are under 30, a lot of people say, oh gosh, you're preaching about having an LGBT affinity group, or you're preaching about having a women's group. We don't need that. We're empowered women, or we're empowered gay men. We're fine being out. We don't want to be with a load of old people talking about history. and then you hear that. But the history is vitally important, because the fight we went through to get where we are remembers that we've got to continue to fight. And even if we feel that we've won our rights for whatever little patch of the world we're in, with whatever issues we have, there is someone else who doesn't have that. And it's we must not reinforce privilege, because to get to equality, we've said we don't have the privilege others have. Let's fight our way through. When you get to that place, don't then become highly privileged and misuse that power. We've got to together. And if there's one message I would say today is, although what I'm doing at Embrace at Cognizant is about a caucus group about LGBTQ+, diversity comes from us all holding hands and all sharing issues.
Well said. Well said. I think that's right. And I think the pendulum does swing back and forth, the needle does go up and down. What I feel heartening about, I'm American, and what I feel heartening about the current situation is that whilst that needle has moved back, it's also continuing to move forward. And I do feel that the change that is happening is really fairly unstoppable. And yes, there will be struggles back and forth, and yes, we have to continue to push, but I do feel that it is ultimately unstoppable and will continue to move forward, although it'd be, 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of a thing. So that's really important. Okay, so next question. What do you think are the legal gray areas around ED&I? What do we need to be sort of conscious about in that respect?
So I think, leading on from a point I said earlier, I think law can't legislate for everything. Probably statement of the obvious. We often know law is slow to catch up with where society is. That's a statement of the obvious. You look at the Gender Recognition Act, which once again is out for consultation. And I think, whilst there has been consultation at a certain level on that, I think a lot of drafting in that act is based on people who have no idea about the underlying issues. I know there are people involved who do, but I think too often we still live in a world where those with privilege are trying to legislate and draft for people who do not have privilege. And therefore, the Gender Recognition Act is for me, an example of something, whilst it's not good enough to say, look, we've got a good intent here, we're making people's lives better than they were. Well, for me, that's not good enough. And I think you see how the consultation around that has failed, how it's been terribly rushed. And that's, I think, a legislative problem and a political, a political problem, that we are often writing bad law that doesn't actually move it forward in the right way. But I think with EDI, I don't think statutory law is the main piece here. I think it's a societal thing. It's a social contract thing between individuals within companies. And I think that's the most important thing to do, because regardless of what the law is, you as an employer, you as a boss, or you as an employee, stand up and say, what do you want? What do you want to do? And lead from the front with your behavior.
So what actions do you see companies taking currently that you feel are effective in promoting EDI? What are the good things that are happening?
So I think there are good things. I'm going to sound very negative, and I know I'm sounding a bit preachy. I think there are lots of good things that are going on. And I think if there's one message I was going to say today, it's baby steps, small steps can be impactful. I think it's very easy to be in a company or in an organization or in a society and say, look, these are such structural issues that I as an individual cannot really move the needle on this. So I'm not going to bother, because it's an elephant in the room. It's the Titanic, whatever analogy you want to use. Small steps can really have an impact. And I think, one of the things I think that companies that are doing EDI well do is really embracing the power of allies. And that is saying that, look, we need everyone to come along with us. You don't have to identify as a particular diverse characteristic. You need to believe in this agenda. And that's where you have real power. And I think the companies that are getting it right is where they're bringing allies along, rather than just beating the drum from within a caucus, within a caucus group. And I think a lot of this starts with recruitment, how we recruit, who we recruit. And that comes down to how you have diverse panels and how you go and find candidates you would not ordinarily find. So in our profession, how do we find black lawyers. How do you do that? We're often failing. I'm sure most of us, if we look around our organizations, or a diversity front, are failing, particularly, black male lawyers. How are we getting there? But another in diversity, are we hiring people who genuinely haven't gone through that traditional legal education route? Are we taking people who've come through alternative paths? How are we looking at that? And that involves effort. Because often, if we go to recruitment agencies or our own recruitment teams, they're going to do what is easy. It's easy to kind of say, that's someone from a Russell group. They've got a law degree. They've got X, Y, and Z. They trained at this law firm. That's very easy to do, to kind of profile people in that way. But that's not really looking at their functional skills. And that's not driving to a diverse team where you are getting the best talent you can. It involves effort. But I think if we all believe in it, we will do it. But I think the teams, one thing doing it well, though, really involves getting your recruitment team or people who recruit on board, because that's your future pipeline. You're not necessarily going to get rid of the people who may be less diverse, who've been in your organization a long time. But that new blood, think about where you're going to drive that. And I think that's critical for driving change. So I think allies and recruitment are two of the key things to do that. But as
sorry, I was just going to say, have you got any specific tips for the allies? So say you are, this bog standard white male lawyer or even white female lawyer these days.
Yes.
What can those allies do to help? Because I think, you look at this, as you say, it's a huge problem. And it's kind of like, where do you start? So what are the sort of small steps that somebody can take who is an ally? What is, one thing they can do to change things?
So I think that's a great question. And I think people who struggle to know, how can I be an ally? Because they say, look, I don't identify as a woman. I don't identify as someone who is Southeast Asian. I don't identify as a lesbian, whatever it is. I'm whoever I am. And they go, I don't understand the issues. You don't have to understand these issues. You don't need to have read every manual on EDI to be an ally. What you are doing as an ally is something fundamentally human. You are recognizing that you have a position of power in your organization, that you have influence, and that position of power is holding out your hand and saying, by holding someone's hand and saying to them, be who you are, that's all you're doing. You don't need to understand what their issues are. You don't need to understand what does it mean to be a lesbian woman? What does it mean to be transitioning gender? You don't need to understand that. If you want to go and learn about it, people will tell you. And don't be frightened about getting the words wrong. Don't say, look, I'm not going to go and be an ally at this meeting because, gosh, I don't know what pronouns are and I don't know how to call someone they or them. Don't get hung up on that. This is human. This is about basic human dignity. If you had a child and that baby was crying on the floor, you would pick it up. That's an instinctive behavior. I know it isn't for some people, but it's generally. So look, if you hate that as an analogy, hate me, but I'm talking about instinctive behavior. All you are doing is holding someone's hand, standing alongside them and saying, I am me, you are you, let's do this together. Don't get hung up on learning the lexicon. Don't get hung up on going on a course on this. You don't have to. It's just human. It's if you're in a sports team, it's being in the team. It's really not hard. And if you do it, you will get so much back.
That's brilliant. Okay. We have to draw to a close in just a minute, but I wanted to ask you one more question, and I'm sorry, a little bit sorry to end on a negative, but what do you see going on out there that's maybe well-intentioned but not working so well?
So I think one of the things when EDI programs don't work so well is when they are led by a resource team. Don't get me wrong, I have a lot of respect for people that do HR, and they are important in an organization. But it needs to be an organization as a whole believing in this. It shouldn't be just another HR initiative that's tangential to what the core of your organization does. This needs to be a frontline activity, not something you do after normal working hours. This should be at the core of what you do. It's about human dignity. It's about equality for all. That and I think when we put it in, wrap it up as an HR initiative, we lose some of that. No disrespect to HR people, but I think we do lose that. And at the same time, I also think we, talking about the allies, that's where the real strength comes from. If you think you're going to change an organization because 3 gay men and a dog get together in a pub and say, we've got issues, we want to change this company, okay, you might enjoy the drink in the pub, but you're not going to change the organization. Everyone needs to come together on this and move in the same direction. So I'm not saying there isn't a value to those caucus groups where, you know, you have a women's group and you go and talk about what are the issues we have as women in this organization, how do we give strength to each other. There's a lot of value in that. But if you never break out of that caucus room, that locked private room, you're never going to drive real change. It's just going to be a place where people are venting, and there's a value to that. But we need to drive change, and that's why allies come in. And I think that's why EDI programs fail when we don't manage to make it mainstream. And mainstream is not HR, mainstream is not caucus groups, mainstream is allies, all of us standing together and believing in human dignity.
Brilliant.